All right. So before lunch, we started fleshing out this address repository. So we haven't debugged any of this yet, so we might have some problems, but in principle at least, we're able to initialize, set up a table for our addresses, and we're able to find elements by their ID in that table, right? We don't have a way of creating addresses though, or deleting them, right? And the other thing that I wanted in here also was update, right? Create, update, and delete. So we probably want some sort of an update, which would be very similar to create, I think. So let's update. So your after lunch assignment, and this is by way of trying to keep the food coma at bay, which is a very difficult thing. I know I've had a couple of you before, but big challenge in these training classes that I can tell you from my experience as a trainer. Big challenge is lunch. Lunch seems to present immense conceptual challenges in the sense that it cripples your brain. So we'll do what we can here. Your assignment, I'm just going to give you this as one big batch, but your assignment is going to be to implement create, update, and delete, all three, for address repository. Again, structure is going to be fairly similar to find and to init, right? You're going to get a connection, get a statement, and then not necessarily a result set, but you'll do maybe a statement.execute update or something like that instead, or just statement.execute, which will let you create, update, and delete. Create is going to be the only challenging one, I think, right? So let's talk about this for just a minute. When we create a row in a table to provide a home for this entity that we're trying to persist, what's it going to do for us when we create this row? What does the database just sort of magically give us?
In return? Success. Nothing.
Success, failure, nothing. No, nothing's the wrong answer. Here's a hint.
So like getting an ID?
Yeah, so we're not telling it the ID when we create an address, right? We give it a new address, but we don't assign the ID ourselves. The database is going to give it to us. So part of your assignment for this create is going to be to figure out how to use this JDBC API to actually update the address object with the ID that the database gave us. Okay.
Without doing a get after a create?
Yeah, without doing another query afterwards. Yeah. The JDBC API will give it to you. It's somewhat clumsy, and again, I'm making you see this not as a form of torture, which, I mean, you might say that this is I'm imposing suffering upon my class here, but this is not a form of torture. This is really to help you understand why Hibernate works the way it does in some ways. Because, like I said, Hibernate has some really good things about it, and it has some really peculiar things about it. So this is something that I need you to pay particular attention to. Okay. So once again, your assignment is create, update, and delete. And for create specifically, you need to figure out how to get that ID. Okay.
Can you upload this on Git?
It is.
Is right now?
Yeah, it should be. Let me double check. I need 2 GitHub windows, I think. Yeah, it's up. Okay, any questions? once you've done create, update should be very easy. Delete should be, well, delete will be super easy. Delete, you don't have to worry too much about SQL. Okay. All right. So I think it's probably around about enough time. So let's, again, a fair amount of this is boilerplate, so I'll copy paste the big try finally nightmare. We have a little bit of a difference though with create. So with create, what does it look like? What's the secret sauce going to be for getting for getting the thing that we need? Well, all right. So again, what's the thing that we need?
The ID.
The ID. Yeah. Yeah, the generated ID. Yeah. So.
There's a flag.
Yeah.
Execute updates.
Yeah. To execute. Yeah. Very good. Okay. So statement.execute update, and you can see, so one of these overloads has a auto-generated keys flag. So I'll pass it some SQL query, and then for auto-generated keys, I can say, let's see, statement dot return generated keys. This is the flag that we want. What this says is that after we execute this update, we can call a method called get generated keys, which will give us actually a result set. Okay. All right. So that's sort of the secret sauce. What's the SQL query look like? The update statement or the
Insert into.
Yeah, insert into address, and we need values. Yeah. So what does it look like again? Oh, sorry. Values, and then I need quotes for all this stuff. So this is gonna suck, right? But this is what we're gonna do. So what do we need? Address.getStreet plus quote comma space plus, right? All this string building. This is fun. Oh, whoops.
You need to put on the code.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, this is easy to screw up. I think that's right. Let me double check here. Yeah, it should be good. Okay, so we've got this horrifying SQL statement, right? Insert into address, and we specify the fields. We have to specify the fields because we can't just put them in order because we're missing the ID, right? It would by default expect that we're actually providing an ID, which of course we're not. So we have to say that we're providing street, city, state, and zip, and then we have to provide the street, city, state, and zip. And then, like I said, we need to return the generated keys. So what do we do with that then?
Send it to the ID address.
Yeah. Wait, well, so how do we get the ID?
Result set again.
Yeah. We actually get a result set. Generated keys is equal to statement dot get generated keys, right? So that's how we can avoid having a separate query, right? The easy way to do this, or the way that we already sort of know how to do it, would be to call find. But it kind of doesn't work because we need the ID if we're looking it up, and so we'd have to just like get the last thing that was inserted, which is a little unreliable. So that this is sort of the correct way. You get the generated keys. We always have to try finally with any result set, right? Generated keys dot close. Yeah. And we're going to say address dot set ID generated keys dot next. Oh wait, I'm sorry. We need to actually. How did I do this before? Did I just do if, or did I just, yeah, I said if. Yeah, if generated keys dot next. Hopefully this will be true, right? Then we'll do generated keys dot get get long ID. Right? We would be very surprised if the generated keys here was an empty result set. And, you know, in fact, we should probably do some better error handling, but I'm not going to worry about it. You know, again, I just kind of want to move on at this point. The point here is that we had to do some work to get, you know, to actually figure out what the database told us, right? This was some actual work. Okay, so now we've populated the ID once it's been persisted to the database, and now our address has everything that we need. So, you know, once we go and create contacts, those contacts can reference IDs, can reference addresses by their IDs, right? That's going to be important. Okay. Let's see. Oh, nice. My auto. Everybody know about auto format in Eclipse? They do Command Shift F or Control Shift F, depending. You can get auto format. So this kind of cleaned my code up here a little bit. All right. Once again, copy paste. Copy paste is the greatest way to write code ever. That was a joke. All right. Okay. How about for update? What's the
Update address.
Update address. Yeah.
Set street.
Yeah, and then we've got to do this whole crazy business again. So set street is equal to address.getStreet. And here, let me just oops. City equals quote state is equal to quote get state zip is equal to, and these are all strings, right? That's why we have to quote them. Oh yeah, and I need to know which thing I'm updating. Yeah. So I need, right. We're trying to only execute an update on one row, not all the rows, right? If I don't have a where clause, this is going to change the addresses of everything in this table, which would be a bad thing. So I need my where clause. ID equal address.get ID, right?
No. You need to pass the ID, right, in the function. Shouldn't you be passing the ID to the function?
It's in the address.
It's in my address. Presumably, this address that I have is already in the database, so I already have an ID.
Okay.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the difference between create and update, right? If create, I don't have an ID yet. Update, I should. If I were really paranoid, I guess I could also pass pass address to, or address ID to update. All right. And return generated keys, that's not important for me anymore, right? I should just be able to do execute update like that and be done. All right. So that's update. And then delete should be the simplest of the three. What's my
Delete from there.
yeah, so delete from address where ID equal where ID equal to address ID, right? Does that look right? I think so. I think that's the end of the address repository, thank God, right? Okay. Enough of that. Let me check this in. It might have bugs, but we'll find that out after I check it in. Because once again, this is totally cowboy style coding here. Git commit -a. All right, so I've pushed that. So any questions about the work that we've done so far, of ignoring the fact that we don't know if it actually functions? No questions? So this, again, this is raw SQL and raw JDBC, right? What things, just incidentally, what other things do we usually do with databases? Like, if you're trying to like do some complex series of operations with a database, what do you?
Transaction.
Yeah, transactions, right? You'll notice that our repository class here doesn't provide any sort of transaction mechanism, right? So this is a very simple, oversimplistic sort of repository, right? So just again, this is just something to keep in mind, right? So no transactions. This just assumes that our updates and our deletes and so on are just atomic, and it doesn't provide any mechanism for rolling back, any sort of error handling, anything like that, right? And this is we got what we paid for, right? We're doing raw SQL. So let's go ahead and actually try to test this. The way that we want to do this is so all right. Let's start out like this. I'm going to create a new package. New package, and I'd like you guys to all do this, please. So follow along. Create a new package called contacts.servlets. Right, we're going to have a number of servlets that will actually let us interface with this data, right? Right, so we've got three packages now: entities, repositories, and now servlets. Yeah, you got it. All right. The thing that we're going to implement right now is actually not a servlet, but it's related. It's going to be a servlet context listener. So it's going to be something that's aware of Jetty's lifecycle, right? So once again, Jetty, Tomcat, JBoss, all of these things, these are all servlet containers, and so they follow a well-defined lifecycle of startup and shutdown. And so the J2E API gives us a way of hooking into that lifecycle, so that we know, okay, our servlet container is initialized. Now we can do some initialization. So that's what we're going to do. That's going to be our first annotated sort of entity that hooks into the servlet business. I'm just going to call it setup because I like simple names. Have you guys noticed, by the way, so any of you have been actually doing some, Spring or Hibernate or any sort of like Java enterprise development? Have you noticed that there's a tendency for really, really long class names?
Near annotation, right? Near annotation is encouraged.
Well, it's not even just Hungarian notation. It's like, this is like the something listener factory repository factory. Or like, you can just make these things up off the top of your head. It's like, oh, this is the, whatever. So I like simple names. I'm going to have a class called setup. If you wanted to be a little bit more Java enterprisey, you could say setup listener. Or something like that, but I'll keep it simple. And setup is going to implement it's going to implement a particular interface called servlet context listener. Okay. Because it is implementing servlet context listener, it needs to implement a couple of different methods, one of which we don't really care about. There's only two, right? Context destroyed, context initialized. Yeah. Okay, so context destroyed, here, let's call this SCE. Context destroyed, we don't care about. We're not going to do anything with this when Jetty shuts down. But when Jetty starts up, that's where we're going to do stuff, right? So what sort of things do we want to do? How are we going to test this code that we just wrote?
Insert. First call the initialize the connection.
Yeah, so we need to. Well, let's pseudocode this, right? So create instantiate a address repository, right? What's the next thing we need to do? What was the first code that we wrote in the repository?
Create tables.
Yeah, we need to actually make those tables happen. So init, right? And then you guys can go nuts. Write whatever code you'd like. Now that this repository exists, go ahead and create some addresses, save them, update the change the address objects, update them. Update them in the DB, and then delete them. So do whatever you like. Have some fun with that. And then what we'll be able to say when we actually run this, we'll actually be able to see those SQL statements come out in HSQL's log. Okay. So this go nuts. All right. So that's your assignment at this point, is to write this initializer. Okay. The go nuts part we're not going to keep around. This is just for playing with. But the init part is something that we really will need, right, for our actual application, right? So we do need this. Okay. Questions? Make sure I get this on recording. Yeah, I'm sorry. There's one other thing that we need here, which is so again, hands up who's done who remembers like web.xml and having to specify lots of things in web.xml. Yeah. So specifying things in web.xml. So that's kind of one way to do is to say that there's going to be a listener in web.xml. But I hate web.xml. I think the trying to minimize the amount of things that we have to do in web.xml, the happier we'll be. I don't remember which release of the API it was, but basically we can do this annotation based now.
3.0.
Is it 3? Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. So we can specify an annotation web listener. We have to mark this class as a web listener, which seems obvious because it implements servlet context listener, but I mean it seems redundant, but we have to do this anyway. So if we annotate this as web listener and run it, then hopefully it should be hitting your breakpoints. Sorry about that. Good. All right. So let's do this. So address repository, address repo. repository. Address repository dot init. And maybe that's a good enough place to start, actually. Oh, hey, this can throw an exception, right? Yeah. All right. Well, fair enough. I'm going to surround all of this stuff with try-catch, right? We can't, in this case, since we're implementing an interface, the interface methods aren't declared to throw an exception. So, so in this case, I'll have to surround this with a try-catch. Right. Address repository dot init, and if that fails, forget it. We'll just print a stack trace. Okay. Now what? So let's create some addresses, right? Yeah. Address. Address equal to new address. And you know what? I want to actually. This is me being sort of persnickety about coding style. All that we have in address right now is just setters, right? For cases like this where we're actually constructing addresses, it'd be nice to have a constructor. So I'm gonna actually go ahead and do that. I'll do it for address and for contact as well, just while I'm at it. So we will create a constructor. Okay. We're not going to give it an ID, but we'll give it everything else. Same with contact. Oh, did you see what I did here? Under the source menu, right? Source, generate constructor using fields. Again, this is just kind of Eclipse shorthand. You can write this code by hand, but it's easy to just let Eclipse do it. Yeah. If it gives you that default call to super, you can keep it or leave it. It doesn't matter either way. Right. We're getting some compile errors now, though. Particularly.
No default constructor.
Yeah, particularly. Yeah, there's no default constructor, right? We're trying to do this new address like this. So we also need a default empty constructor.
Also getting HSQL.
Oh, okay. We'll get back to that. Right now I'm being a little bit OCD about my code, so I have to indulge that before anything else.
One quick question. In the init, right, you always create the table, right? So every time you run, should we be handling it?
So that's another question. That's a valid question, and I'll get back to that in just a moment. The short answer is we don't have a good way of dealing with that. So it won't crash, but yeah, we'll see an exception every subsequent time we run the program saying, hey, that table already exists. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Some SQL dialects let you do, create table if not exists, but HSQL doesn't have that. So the only way to deal with it is just absorb the exception, just swallow it. Right. Okay. So where were we? Go back to setup. So a new address with what? What's the address here? 150 West Tasman Drive, San Jose, California. Anybody know the zip code here?
95134.
95134. All right. Awesome. Okay. So we've got a new address. What do we want to do? Address repository dot save, right? Or sorry, dot create, right? So this is how we actually create that in the database. So let's try this and see what happens, right? I want to actually run this for a change because we haven't done this yet. So I'll do this just like I did before. I'll run it just directly from within Eclipse. Okay. So I've got my run configuration set up here already, but if you don't, you can always just do run as. Oh, well, from the project you can do run as Maven build, right? I'll do the one that I already have. Okay. So we can see that it's doing something, right? We're getting some log, you know. So it's saying, okay, we're spawning the connection pool. Our connection pool is going to have a default of 20 connections. Starting the Jetty server, and then from there it doesn't really say anything, right? The way that we're going to sort of look under the covers is you can actually check this out. In your Eclipse projects, you should be able to see the target directory. Yeah. Under your target directory, there's a data folder. It's there because that's how I configured. That's how I configured the database. I told it, you know, dump all your stuff under here. And you'll see a few things. It's like temp folder, trainingdb.log.properties, and so on. So what I want you to do is open up trainingdb.log, and it'll probably want you to refresh. Which, here we go. And just, you know, see what it gives you.
I don't have it.
Really?
Training data, the target data, not have it.
Try refreshing your project. If you right-click on the project and just do refresh or F5. Is it there now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. The way I actually usually do this is just from the command line, but same difference. Trainingdb.log. Again, you may have to refresh your project to see it. Okay, so this is the live sort of log of what's going on in our HSQL database, right? We create the table, and, you know, I mean, this is just the query that we typed out. So, excuse me. So there shouldn't be any surprises here. But the pleasant thing, the very pleasant thing, is that, you know, we actually see this insert into address values, right? And kind of curious thing, right? When we typed this all out in our longhand SQL, we did this in lowercase, so you can tell that the SQL engine is actually parsing this and doing some stuff, right? If only because it's different punctuation. Right, there's no spaces in between the commas and everything, so you can see that it's done something and it's committed. You know, so we could go ahead and do a search and update and all that stuff as well, right? So that would all work. All right, let me stop this now. So guys, if you're running your application from within Eclipse and you want to stop it, go to your console. You guys know how to find your console? Or if it ever gets lost, there's a few ways to find it, but probably the most surefire way to find it is Show View Console. It's under the window menu, right? So once you've got your console up, there's a big red button there. You can just hit Terminate. So that'll stop the server. It doesn't do a nice cleanup like it does when you do Control-C. It just forcibly quits it, which kind of sucks, but it doesn't seem to have any bad, no obvious bad effects. Okay, so then if I try to run this again, it'll, well, not crash exactly, but you'll see a stack trace, right? If we just do another Jetty run without cleaning, right? If we do a Maven clean, it's actually going to blow away that target directory, so there'll be no problems. But if we just do another Jetty run, it'll start running and everything, and then the first thing that you'll see is a big stack trace that's, fortunately we're sort of dumped at the very bottom of the stack trace, but you can see, it's that this address table already exists, right?
Can you open that file again, the DB file, after refreshing?
Sure. Yeah, let's, yep. Yeah. So, yeah. So, table already exists. That's not cool. Right, and we didn't really handle the exception, so what happened? If we go back and look at our setup code, right? The only way that we handled the exception was to give up, right? So probably we want to move this code down below the catch. We probably want to put it in a finally or something like that. But obviously we're not going to have this sort of setup code in a real application. Is there anything that we can do about this? Is there anything that we can do to sort of gracefully fall back from the possibility that this table has already been created in a previous run?
Yeah, handle the specific exception.
Yeah, we can try to handle the specific exception. So what kind of exception? Let's see, where did we go?
Can you go to the init? Which line did it crash?
It crashed on, well, I mean, it crashed on init, right? We tried doing it, so we tried to do create table.
But isn't that a query inside an exception block, try catch block?
It is.
We are not handling it.
Yeah, but we're not really doing anything with it. We're just repackaging it as a runtime exception, I think. Yeah. So we get this java.sql syntax error exception saying that object name already exists. So one way that we could recover from this is by catching SQL syntax error exception and checking to see if its error message contains this text, which is sort of a ridiculous way of dealing with it. For now, again, I'm not trying to solve the world's problems in JDBC here, because Hibernate is going to deal with a lot of this stuff for us. So just I want to just call that out as a problem that we'll resolve by moving to Hibernate, right? For now, we'll just live with that problem. Cool. Okay. So we're living with it. All right. So what I want to do now, just to kind of justify the work that we've been doing so far, is start cataloging some JDBC pain points, right? JDBC pain points. Like, what have we had to do so far that we didn't like doing, and what didn't we even do? Somebody here, let's talk about this. What sucks about all the code that we just wrote?
It's repetitive. It's long.
Yeah, very repetitive code.
Multiple places to catch, take care of things if you want to make one change. The entity.
Yeah. So that's a big deal, right? Entity and SQL can get out of sync. That's a big issue.
Permission configurations.
Table and initialization, like, I feel like we shouldn't have to do that. Multiple table, throw exception. Right, that sucks. What else? Well, I mean, it's pretty easy to get our SQL wrong.
Yeah.
It just happens that we actually knew enough SQL to be able to do this, but it'd be very easy to get the punctuation wrong, or again, since these things can get out of sync, like that kind of sucks. So this is painful so far, right? Ideally, Hibernate would initialize all our tables for us, and would know how to persist and serialize and deserialize things, right? So. Right, marshalling and unmarshalling this data is very clumsy. So these, what I'm trying to establish here is a set of criteria that, if you were going to build something like Hibernate, what would the problems be that you'd be trying to solve, right? So these are the problems that we're going to try to solve with Hibernate, right? So we'll kind of sit on this for a bit. We'll probably be able to add a few more issues here as well. Okay, now since this has been so repetitive and since we love repetition, let's implement another repository. And I promise you this is the last one that we'll do, right? It'll be simpler. You're going to implement the contact repository, which will be more or less copy and paste from the address repository. Right? The contact repository is going to be the same thing, except for contacts. Right? So every place you see address, you're going to replace it with contact, and then what are the fields of a contact? Well, ID we already know about, and then just name and address ID. So it'll be a little bit less code. Okay, so this is your next assignment, and since we've already written this code once, I'm hoping it shouldn't take you guys too long. Again, you'll want to verify that this thing works by writing some code in setup, right? Cool. So that's the task. Is I'm literally going to do copy paste contact repository. And so your job is just to make the contact repository do the right thing for contacts. Just to save a little bit of time, I'll do this along with you. Or you can do it along with me. Either way, either way, the work's got it done. So it's not that intellectually stimulating at this point. So let's just get through it. Any changes necessary in the constructor for getting the data source? No. Yeah, that doesn't change, right? Init. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so we need to create table contact, right? So ID integer generated by blah 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 blah. And then what do we have? Name. And then what? Yeah. Address, and I'll call this address underscore ID integer. And we need a foreign key constraint, right? What does that look like? Yeah. Comma, yeah, so foreign key address ID references address. That's what it looks like in our SQL. Yeah. Oh, I guess we should put another item in our JDBC pain points here, which is one must know SQL. And also, I mean, I should say, not just that, but one must know SQL and know which SQL dialect to speak, right?
So with Hibernate, you wouldn't need to know joins and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So for example, like we said that some SQL dialects can do create table if not exists. Some dialects can't. Some dialects, the way that you create those foreign key constraints looks a little bit different, and so on, right? And And we started out today by saying, okay, you know, we want to try to keep this as database independent as possible, right? We wanted to try to generalize and not, you know, like the reason why we were using JNDI and using this container managed database was so that we didn't have to specifically know that we're initializing HSQL or MySQL or whichever, right? But here, like this, you know, this actually is a problem. We since we're writing out raw SQL, we need to know which dialect, yeah. So that's a pain point. That's something that's sort of implicit here, right? I think this one as well. This you know, ID integer generated by default as identity primary key. Like I think it looks a little bit different in Oracle, right? I mean, I'm not even sure. Right. Okay. Okay, so that's init. How about find?
Can you show me the init again? The
Sure.
query, create table,
Yeah.
and then
So the beginning is all the same, right?
yeah, last.
Name is the same. Address ID is an integer,
The foreign key.
and then foreign key.
How do we know that the address, the foreign key that he has to map to is the primary key then? Shouldn't it be, you should give an ID here in the address, references address. In
Oh,
bracket,
references
ID.
address ID.
Yes.
It's implicit in this dialect. Yeah, you could say a references address ID. I think like that.
Yeah, that's how. Okay.
Yeah, I think you can do it that way also here. It works with that. Yeah. Okay. Find. All right. Well, here's where I'm going to start getting really lazy. I'm going to do a global find and replace here. I'm going to find all address with uppercase and replace it with contact. Right. Case sensitive. Yeah. Find. Replace. 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 All right. We're doing pretty good. Do the same thing for lowercase. Oops. Yeah, maybe a whole word is probably better. Whatever. Find. Some of these are wrong, but I'll just do it anyway. You can see how much fun we have with this, right? All right. Okay. So find is actually starting to look decent. Find might actually be correct. Let's see. So we do select star from contact where ID equals ID. So that's actually right. Amazingly enough. Create is wrong though, right? Right, so we need to insert into contact. What are the columns? Just name and address underscore ID, right? Values are contact get name, get address ID. Yeah. Update, similar. So we're going to set name equals contact get name, and address ID is equal to contact get address ID. We do still need this where clause. Right. And delete is right, so the only thing that's left is unmarshal. Set ID, set name, set address ID.
Get in.
What's wrong with that?
Get in.
Ah. Long. Yeah. Thank you. All right. Whew. That was fun. There's another method that we're actually going to want, which will only take a second. And that is for our application, since this, we're not just writing a software engineer torture device, we're actually writing an application. We want to be able to list all of the contacts in the address book, right, in our contact list. So we need a find all method, right? Not find by ID. We need something that's very similar to find, but does a select all, select star from contact with no where clause. Sorry. Public list. So it's going to return a list of contacts, right? List of contact. Find all. Right. So that's going to be your last little assignment in here. And let me get this checked in for you. Okay. All right. Did everybody catch that? What you need to do right now? Implement contact repository.findAll. And this is pushed up to GitHub now, so you can get it.
Simply use a select star, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, select star works just fine, and you'll be able to reuse your unmarshal method, right? Got it already. Pretty easy. I always find it interesting looking at people's signatures on the sign-in sheet. People always have very different signatures. Okay. So,
Return it as a list, or do you want?
yeah, just return it as a list. Easy enough. So, if you wanted to be a little bit more generic about it, you could return it as an iterable or something like that. But I think list is going to be okay. Like I said, actually, I think you might have missed it. There's a lot of stuff where when I teach my Java language classes, I'm very particular about sort of coding style. When I teach this class, a lot of coding style goes out the window just because Hibernate requires you to write in a very peculiar way. So I don't worry about it too much. I think here a list is just fine. All right. So find all, right? Find all is not going to just try to do next once. It's going to try to do a while loop, right? While results.next. We're going to, well, we need to populate some sort of a list, right? So list contact, thank you. I'm feeling brain dead after lunch. A list of contacts equal to new list, new array list, yeah. Why array list, by the way? I mean, this has nothing to do with Spring or Hibernate, but why array list?
Simplest.
Simplest, I mean, in terms of performance, is array list.
It's huge. I mean, if you're going to create a huge list, it depends on how much you're going to populate, right? Basically, it's an array instead of a tree or a
yeah.
binary.
It's a vector, right? Basically.
It's basically just a raw, a raw array essentially. Array list.
So it's an expandable array.
Yeah, and it's expandable. Yeah, array list works out to be sort of the best general purpose list. If you're inserting into the middle of it a whole lot, it's very inefficient. Otherwise, it's random access and basically constant time append. Constant time append. So contacts.add Marshall results. Return contacts. Right. So just select star from contact, and that's I think all that we need. Does that look like what I think it should look like? Yeah. Yep. All right, very exciting. The exciting world of JDBC. So we're starting, we're starting to basically build up a list of criteria of what we expect from a good object relation mapper. This is really just about all that I want to do with these repositories for now. What time? Let's see. We got back from lunch at 2. So let's just talk a little bit about. Let's see, 3, 5. Well, yeah, we've got a little bit more time. So, all right, let's start out by talking about servlets and JSPs and stuff. Right, we're done with our database stuff. Okay. I guess the last thing that we could do to really be done with our database stuff is to make sure that we also initialize our contacts. Right. Shouldn't forget that. Contact. Repository contact repository is equal to new contact. Actually, let's do it the stupid short way. New address repository dot init and new contact repository dot init. And I think this is basically what we want our initialization to look like right now. Right? Yeah. All right. Let me check this in. Then we'll start talking about servlets and JSPs. All right. Cool. I mean, before I move on, I guess I should always ask, are there any questions? Any questions on the On the perils of JDBC. Ooh, I think I forgot. No transactions. Right, we haven't done anything with transactions in our.
Joins as well, right?
Well, we haven't really talked about joins. Yeah, the fact that our addresses and our contacts relate to each other in some way. Yeah, we haven't even talked about that. Yeah. So anyway, all right. So that's JDBC pain points. Any questions on any of this stuff before we start talking about the front end? Right. This was all back end code. Now what we're going to be doing is writing essentially front end code. You're going to be full stack web developers, all of you.
How were you running the code? Like, what was the option that you were using to run it?
Okay. Let me show you that again. Oops. Sorry. One way. So do you?
Jetty run is fine.
Yeah. Do you have a Maven installed from the command line?
Yes.
Okay. So if you want to do from the command line, you can just do mvn jetty : run. Very easy. If you want to do it from within Eclipse or STS, right, you can do run as here. And I've already got this set up. If you don't have it set up yet, you can right-click on your training project, say run as Maven build, and just specify jetty run in the goals here. You see this this thing here? This is where you put jetty run, right?
So Maven build is an additional thing? I mean, I downloaded Spring to Uxmal, but I didn't have Maven build.
It ought to be in there.
STS should have Maven build.
Yes. Yeah, it ought to be in there. So if you've got some problem with that, then in either case, like doing it from the command line is totally fine. The only downside is you just can't run it in a debugger there. But you don't need to. You won't have any bugs, so it's okay. All right. So, questions? No? Right. This is all our sort of our back end. You know, if we think of this as a 3-tiered architecture, this is our data tier, right? And sort of part of our business logic, right? The fact that we have these entities now that allows us to write business logic. Right. Okay. So let's talk about servlets. And in order to talk about servlets without you falling asleep, I will stand up. Yeah, here we go. Standing up is such a powerful teaching tool. It's awesome. Okay, so once again, show of hands, how many people have worked with HTTP servlets before? Web servlets, yeah? Yeah, so most of you guys, how many of you have not had any prior exposure to servlet API? Okay, one of you is missing. She's not paying attention though, so it's okay. Okay, so basically, what is a servlet? What what things can you tell me about servlets that you already know?
It's an HTTP service
So
container.
I want to be careful about terminology because like so jetty is the container. We say jetty or Tomcat or JBoss, right? That's the servlet container, or the application server, right? Is the servlet container, which then sort of says, okay, well, so if the servlet container contains servlets, then what's a servlet?
Well, that's an interface.
Yeah, it's an abstract base class, right? It's an abstract base class that knows how to respond to HTTP requests, right? Do you guys remember applets? Java applets? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, Java applets. You haven't seen those in a while. They were really a big deal in 1996.
The browser still run that?
Yeah, browsers. Yeah, you can still download like a applet plugin. Yeah, as part of your JVM. Yeah, right. And applets. So back in the very early days of Java, the question was always, okay, are you going to write a Java application or are you going to write a Java applet? Right. An application is something that has a main, right? A public static void main method, right? And an applet was something that had a something that implemented the applet interface or the applet abstract base class, whatever. I can't even remember. So servlet, same deal, right? A servlet is not a standalone application, right? If you're running servlets, you don't have your main method, right? Your main method is buried somewhere deep down in your servlet container, like Jetty, right? So you run Jetty, Jetty knows how to run itself, and then what does it do? It's going to look for servlets in your class path somewhere. It's going to look for things that implement HTTP servlet, or just servlet, right? Servlet is actually like HTTP servlet is a specific kind of servlet, right? You can do arbitrary TCP programming in servlets, which is sort of a horrifying concept, but hey, you can. So when I talk about servlets, I'm talking about HTTP servlets. What kind of methods then are on the servlet class?
Get request.
Yeah, do get.
Response.
Yeah,
post.
do get, do post, do put, right? Yeah. So those are the callbacks that you'd fill in, right? Okay. Okay. So let's say you wanted to write hello world, for example, and we can actually do that just as a quick exercise. Let's actually make a hello world servlet. Right, just this is like a 3-minute exercise, so it's not a big waste of time. Let's write a hello world servlet. What does that look like? Well, we'll do this as a group, okay? If I'm going to make a servlet, I do new, and I can actually cheat. I can actually do new other, and there's actually like a servlet, but I'll just do new class. That's the easy way. So hello world, right? This is my hello world servlet. How do I know it's a servlet? It extends HTTP servlet, yeah. It extends HTTP servlet. We're getting a little compiler warning here because HTTP servlet implements serializable, but it doesn't have a serial version ID, so I'll just include this just to shut the compiler up. Not important, right? And then, okay, so what do we want hello world servlet to do?
Print HTML back.
Yeah, give some HTML, right? So we need to override source, override do get, right? We're going to send a get request in HTTP. Hey, everybody pretty happy with HTTP in general? Well, hey, you don't have to be happy with HTTP. Everybody pretty comfortable with HTTP? Yes, all right, good. Yeah, so get request, right? Get request is generally what your browser issues when you're surfing the interwebs. So do get, right? Pet peeve about Eclipse, or maybe it's just about my dependency that I've got, but it doesn't have debugging symbols, so I always just get these arg0, arg1. So I'm going to call this request response, right? Okay. All right. So how do we do this then?
Request dot, you to set the type and response type, right?
Yeah. So I can say
Headers,
response dot set. Yeah, we can do set
content
header.
Content type.
Yeah, content. Yeah, so content type, right? Might be text, HTML. Sure. Then what? How do we actually write the body of the thing?
Yeah, just set the response.
Response
set
dot
body. Set body.
not set body. We need to get so you can get the way that we always write to.
The string buffer.
So yeah, so we have.
Response.
We have either a print writer or an output stream. We can get either one, and they're both the same thing. You have to use it consistently. So in a servlet, if you are outputting to the writer, you have to always output to the writer. You can't mix and match that with the output stream. So response.getWriter dot what? Print line. Right, something like that. Sweet. Right. Hey, it's it's totally a servlet. We're missing just one thing though. Again, remember all this web.xml nonsense, right? We need to configure our servlet container to sort of to pick this up, right? Our servlet container. Just because this thing extends from HTTP servlet isn't good enough for Jetty. Is not good enough for a servlet container or application server, right? We need to tell the application server that in fact this is going to be in our context and it's going to be attached to some path, right? It needs to respond to some URL, right? So what is well we can do that in web.xml, right? If you really like XML. I don't really like XML, so I'll use an annotation called web servlet, and we'll say that this listens on hello, right? Right. So that's not too bad, right? We can try to run this. Oops. Run this way. We're getting the same complaints about object name already exists. I don't really care because this is just hello world anyway. Okay, so let me go to my browser. Localhost 8080/hello. Ta-da! Right. All right. So nothing too fancy there. I'll actually check this in for you in a couple minutes, just to make sure you have this to copy off of. But I want to talk first about some problems with this approach, right? What might be some problems if you wanted to actually do real web programming like this? If you wanted to implement like a real website.
HTML. No.
Say Java class.
Yeah. We're assembling all our HTML in here like this, right? Which is bad for a few reasons, right? It's bad because we can't use our normal HTML editors. I mean that's kind of crappy. It's bad because we're intermingling business logic with presentation, right? We always want sort of a separation of those two concerns, right? We want our presentation layer distinct from our business logic, right? So the ideal thing to do would actually be to have some other presentation-specific way of doing stuff, right? And that's where JSPs come in, right? JSP puts the HTML first. Like writing JSP pages is basically like writing HTML, more or less, right? So I'm going to show you a sample JSP. Do a simple, let's call this one hello servlet. Call that one hello servlet. And oops, hey, cool. My Jetty just picked up the change. Let's stop it from running, I guess. Okay. So if we want to do JSPs, the best, you can kind of put them anywhere, but sort of Maven convention again is to put them under web app. So I'm going to create a new folder here, just call it JSP, and I'll create a new I'll just do a new file. Hello.jsp. Right? So this one's going to be right. That's our JSP. I guess I'll do hello world servlet over here, right? Okay. I've been so far managing to avoid XML configuration as much as possible, right? I've got my nice annotation here, but I don't have a good way of telling the servlet container that this is also something that it should pay attention to, right? If I run this right now, if I do, here, let me yeah, let's just run like this. Okay, if I run this right now, let's see. Oops.
You need to change it to servlet.
Yeah, localhost hello servlet, right? So hello servlet, and I also want a hello.jsp, but that doesn't exist, and I don't think it's here either.
Inside.
Oh, here it is actually. Okay, so I can access it statically, but if I try to put any like stuff in here, like right, this should be evaluated as well. This should come out to null, but what it I think is, oh, no kidding. I don't have to do anything. Doesn't matter though. I still want to set this up properly because of the way that we're going to get these things talking to each other. Right. This is actually sort of an implementation detail. The fact that I had to explicitly navigate to this JSP/hello.jsp. I don't want to expose that implementation detail. As somebody looking from the outside in, I don't want to know that JSP is my implementation, because that's embarrassing. So what I want to do is a couple different things. What I want to do first of all is set up in web.xml something that I have to look up once again. Come on. There we go. Servlet mapping. Servlet mapping. So this is what we normally have to do if we're not using annotations, right? We have to do the servlet mapping business. So servlet name is going to be JSP, right? JSP is the JSP processor, right? That comes built in. And the URL pattern is anything that's under the JSP directory. Do I have to do /star? Yeah. What? Ah, go away. Oh, I shouldn't have. Okay. All right. Stop. All right. So we run this. I think we run this. Yeah, there we go. All right. So now a couple things, right? This still exists, but now I can also reference it just. Actually, no, I still can't. Yeah, I still have to do like that. All right, but at least this is actually set up like officially properly now. All right. The way that we usually like to do this, the way that we usually like to separate our business logic from our presentation logic, is we always handle incoming requests through a servlet, and then redirect the basically implement out responses by redirecting to a JSP. This is sort of our rudimentary way of doing model view controller. Won't talk about models yet, but basically our servlets are our controllers, our JSPs are our views. So let's say this all discussion is boiling down to what is model view controller, right? And in support of this discussion, I'm going to attempt on my laptop screen here to draw a horrible picture. We'll see if I can make this work. All right, so I've got a request coming in. Right. The request comes into some sort of a servlet, right? So call this servlet over here, right? And that servlet has like a do-get method or a do-post method or whatever. All right. What we have so far in our servlet is just spitting out HTML. That's no good, right? That's terrible. We want our servlet to do all the logic, right? Our servlet should do all the business logic of figuring out how to handle this request, what data it might need, right? Right. So we've got a here, let's get some different colors, right? We've got a database. Woo! And I'll try to, yeah. Here's my awesome database, right? Right, so the servlet knows something, blue, yeah. So the servlet knows how to get information from the database, and that's what it's going to use to assemble some sort of a model, right? And then it's going to ideally populate some sort of a view, right, which is our JSP. So it's going to pull information out of the database, process it somehow, and stuff it into a view. Right? In our Hello World example, we don't care about the database. We don't have any sort of model at all. So right now we're just talking about our controller, right? Our controller, again, is where the business logic happens, and our view, right? So this is just the controller view pattern. So, there we go. Okay, so the way this generally works in my Hello World servlet, instead of doing this, set content type and then printing using a writer, what I would do instead is I'd get the responses. I have to remember what this thing is. I believe it's the. Wait, where is that thing? Is it? Not the output stream. Actually, I think it's on the request. Give me just a second. Yeah, it is on the request. Right, it's the request dispatcher. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Get request dispatcher. Yeah. So you get what's called a request dispatcher for your view, which is going to be JSP/hello.jsp, right? Right, this is sort of our general pattern, right? Our servlet, which is this hello servlet URL, right, is going to handle the incoming request, and the way that it's going to do it is by dispatching to this view. View.forward request response. Right? All right. Our Jetty just restarted, so here's what I ought to see. If I just go to hello servlet, I should see hello world JSP. Okay. All right. Now we haven't done anything populating this view with a model, but I don't want to worry about that just yet. I just wanted to show you this sort of general pattern here. Right, this is an architectural style that's very prevalent in any web development, and I wanted to, just kind of before we take a break, I wanted to have a little discussion about sort of this MVC pattern, right? Our servlet is our controller, has all the business logic, so here our business logic is nothing, right? But our business logic would populate some data model and give it to the view. The view would consume that model, basically just filling in the blanks. And that's what we would end up seeing.
So where would the model fit in here? If there are a model.
Yeah, so we'll do that next after the break. Okay. So let me check this in. I want to do this here. We'll end up deleting our Hello World stuff, but just so you can see it as a point of reference when I start asking you to write. Because the thing that we're going to finish today with is actually quite a bit of code like this. We're going to write some models and views and controllers to add contacts, remove contacts, to list all our contacts, and so on, right? So this will be, like I said, full stack, right? Full stack application development. Okay, so let me check this in. Oops. Let's see, we've got the Hello World Java, web, yeah, all right. So
Did you manually create that JSP in like subdirectory, or is that
yes,
part of something?
yeah, I did. Yeah,
Interesting.
it was the magic of create directory. Yeah. Okay. So that's checked in. We'll see how models fit into this picture next, right? There's probably not a whole lot interesting we can do with the model here, but we'll come up with something, and we'll see how we end up pushing logic into the JSP. So let's take a break now. It's 3:45, and we can take a 10, 15 minute break, whatever, get some coffee. I don't want to kill you. This is, like I said, week-long class is a hard thing to do. So take a good break. Okay.